I would say that not coming too quickly is my number one priority.
My only thing in my caption is never been to Paris, but I've heard the Eiffel Tower is fun.
If it's a twosome in threesomes clothing, I don't think that's going to be a happy ending.
Started as a Tinder date with one, and he asked if his brother could join in while we started hooking up, and I thought, why not? Because they were gorgeous.
Whoa, that's some White Lotus shit.
I know.
You know, a threesome's a special occasion, and if all three of you are single, then there is absolutely less baggage.
Hunter Smith.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Hookup Podcast.
Thank you so much for being here in your little hookup cavern.
I know.
It's adorable.
It is what we call the ABC janitor's closet.
Oh, yeah.
But we've done it up with a set. If you are listening via your ears, you can go watch us on the vodcast on the Triple J YouTube channel. But you were just commenting on our sexy books.
Your little pervert books. I love them. Yeah.
Now, look, obviously Dee is still away and I have got you here to play with me, which is so fun. People might recognize you actually from our vodcast where we did a live show at Melbourne International Comedy Festival. Hunter, if people don't know who you are, if they haven't seen that episode, shame, firstly. Secondly, can you introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah. My name is Hunter Smith. I'm a comedian, I'm a writer, and I'm sexually active. So I'm the perfect person for the show.
I know. I literally, I hate to say this, but the topic which you would have clicked on, threesomes, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I was like, I think I want Hunter to talk to me about this. I feel like Hunter might have some experience. And I sent you a voice note over like Insta DMs. And I was like, I don't know how to phrase this, but like, have you fucked with three people at a time? You were
The
like,
voice note I've always been waiting for.
yeah. What was your genuine reaction like listening to that?
Well, you know, when you get a voice note, I could see that it went for like a minute 31. And I thought, what the is she going to say to me? I thought I had no idea. So I was absolutely delighted.
Okay,
it was what was it? It was an inquisition and an invite. What more could you want?
Well, I wanted to do this topic for such a long time because at the end of last year, we did like this episode talking about our sex bucket list for summer.
Right.
I don't know if you ever do this, but it's pretty fun to write these down and see if you can tick off some things in the boxes. But I failed to tick off my threesome. I wanted specifically an MMF, so male, female.
Yeah.
Or male, female, which we will tell you very soon in this episode there's a difference.
We'll decode.
But yeah, I haven't done it yet.
So what's going on there? Why haven't you done it? Who's at fault? You or society?
Probably me.
Have you been on the hunt?
I have. I've been on apps. I've been looking high and low for my bi boys in Nam.
Yeah.
It's hard. I think people, especially guys in that sort of dynamic, it's kind of hard to get it together. Guys are very much willing to be like, oh, if there's another girl, down.
Yeah.
Definitely like FFM, keen.
Right.
Yes. So I'm there, I'm looking, and trust and believe, I need your help. So this is kind of why I thought, let's do this episode. How are you navigating threesomes? Like, how's it working for you? Because I clearly need a hand. So let's get into it. Hunter, if you're not already following us, at Triple J, The Hookup is where you can find us on Instagram. And this is where we do polls. We're very research-led on this show.
I like that.
So,
I like to hear what the people think.
Yeah, exactly. We did a poll asking, have you had a threesome? 39% of you said yes. 61% of you said no. So,
Right. What did you think of those results? Were you surprised?
I mean, no, I think this is kind of where I thought. But I also think like our audience is really progressive, our followers on Instagram. So maybe I thought a few more people would have had threesomes.
Yeah. I feel like this should make you feel better about not being able to score a bucket list threesome.
It does actually.
61% of people ain't getting it.
Yeah, ain't getting it. Out of that 39% of you who are getting it, we asked, did you enjoy or do you enjoy doing it like as a regular thing? 48% of you said love it. 10% of you said not for me. And 42% of you said I could take it or leave it.
Wow, I find it to be sort of take it or leave it to be a really interesting result. Because one thing I think about threesomes, and I think we'll get to this, is it's a real, excuse the phrasing, but it's a real suck it and see situation. Don't you think? Like, I feel like when you get into it, it's either that's definitely for me or it's a complete turn off.
I agree. Like it should be like a polarizing thing, right?
Yes, it should be a polar. If you're doing it right, it should be polarizing.
Yeah. But the thing is, I think what we're going to find out today is that there are so many different ways that you can do a threesome. There are so many variations. It's almost like if you look at like one of those graphs where you answer and it keeps going along and the web gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That's kind of how I feel about this after doing a bit of research and hearing all your DMs and voice memos, because there are so many variations. One time I feel like it could go really well for you and then another you're just like, nah. So that's what we're going to get into in this episode. I'm really excited. We talked before about how I sent you the 1.5 minute voice memo being like, hey, have you had a threesome? Obviously, you've had a little bit of experience in this realm.
Yeah.
I wanted to start off and ask you, like, who are you doing it with? Where are you finding these people? How are you initiating?
Well, I've done a little stock take. I've gone through my memories, gone through my DMs. So for me, the threesomes have either come together from people I know in real life.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the most common.
Yep.
And then the apps. And
Yeah.
Without giving too much away, I think that if I'm arranging threesomes on the apps, it's a lot more immediate. It's like, what are you doing in the next 10 to 20 minutes? But when it's
Wow.
friends, it's a lot more either more casual or more planned.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Like
interesting.
casual on a night out or
Yeah.
like planned ahead of time.
Love that. Well, from our DMs, I kind of feel like we had a bunch of different places that people were like meeting people and making these threesomes happen. So a few people were like Instagram, people just reaching out on Instagram.
I can relate to that after your message.
Yeah. Yes.
Imagine if that's what I thought when you sent me the DM. I thought, this woman is asking me for a threesome.
Oh my God, can you imagine?
Oh no, it's a job interview. Bow-bow.
No, how boring. That would have been amazing. But yeah, you know, Instagram, we always say is kind of becoming, well, it kind of is like a dating app, right?
Amen.
Yeah, like people are cold calling, they are flame reacting.
Yeah.
It's happening out
Yeah,
there.
my
So,
best mate is in the hunt for a boyfriend right now, and he doesn't have Instagram, and he's sending me people on like, you know, the other apps, the dating apps.
Mm-hmm.
And I said the other day, I'm like, you are playing with one hand behind your back with that Instagram. You need to
True.
be sliding to DMs, flame reacting, all
Yeah.
that. That's how you catch a dick in 2025. man.
I love that. I actually thought you were going to say he was sending you screenshots to be like, find this person on their Instagram for me or something.
Well, you know, actually, not to get too
'Cause that
much
does
into
help.
his life, but he has a creeper Instagram. You know what I
Okay,
mean? So
a
he can keep an
Finsta.
eye on people. Yeah, but he can't be
Yeah.
reacting with that because it's a giveaway.
No. Yeah. Okay. Well, people are finding people on Instagram. Obviously, the apps that we were speaking about. Field is a big one. That's the main one that I was like looking for my little hot threesome moment. Another person messaged us saying Red Hot Pie. I've never heard of this app before, but it's kind of giving like swingers vibes.
Yeah, I like a business where the clue's in the name, and I feel like that really does what it says on the tin.
Yeah. Okay, so other people are finding it just through going to sex parties. Classic. Like, obviously, you're there. You may as well give like a trio moment a go.
And you know what's good about that setup is that you know what everyone's intentions are.
Oh,
You're
100.
unlikely to be. Well, you could get rejected for sure, but you're
Yeah.
unlikely to misread the vibe.
Yes, 100%. Like you said, through friends. And quite a lot of people actually message us saying, it was basically like, I saw you across the room at the bar vibe. You know, that
like the
kind of thing.
the meme setup.
Exactly. So we got a voice memo from Tanya talking about this.
So I had a threesome a few years ago when I was living overseas. I was just out having a few drinks at a bar. So I got chatting to this couple. Turns out it was their anniversary and they booked like a boutique hotel just across the road from where we were all drinking. And we were all wrapping up, and that's when they kind of hit me with so do you want to come back to the hotel with us?
That's the dream.
Isn't that the best thing
That's
ever?
the dream.
Has that happened to you?
No, never. Never. Oh, I mean, the way she described it is very classy. Some pretty woman stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I suppose it's happened to me in a more, could barely see you across the nightclub. You know what I mean? But that's giving like money.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Did she say hotel? Did I make up hotel?
Hotel. She
Yeah,
went back to the
that's
hotel with the couple. And it was
fancy.
their anniversary. Because it was the anniversary, the hotel staff had put rose petals on the bed for the couple, but it was
Yeah,
like
yeah.
this magic like storybook moment.
Yeah.
That's a dream for
I feel like
her.
we started with the fantasy setup and it's all downhill from here.
Yes, I know. Okay, so like you said before, planned versus spontaneous is something I was thinking about as well. And like obviously with Tanya right there, she was like, it was spontaneous. Like they saw me across the bar, they liked my vibe, they took me home. And as you were saying, like sometimes you can plan it with friends and it's a little bit more in advance, but with the app, you said what, 10 to 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, sure.
Love
Wham, bam,
that.
thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, it's literally love that. We had lots of people talk about that. We had this DM from Amy. I think you're going to absolutely love this. Amy said, I had a male-female threesome with twin brothers. It was somewhat spontaneous. Girl. Started as a Tinder date with one and he asked if his brother could join in while we started hooking up. And I thought, why not? Because they were gorgeous. In retrospect, I doubt it was their first rodeo.
Whoa, that's some White Lotus shit.
I know. So if you don't already follow us, we like repost a lot of like answers when people are, you know, going into the topics that we're asking you about. Reposted this, probably about 30 DMs of people going, what
Oh, yeah,
the
that'd be a hit.
fuck? It was a hit. People were loving it. But yeah, there's something to be said about like definitely wasn't their first rodeo. Like he was like, get the twin
This
in
is
here.
the plan.
Get
Yeah,
the twin.
yeah, yeah. You know what I think I would be thinking? That they
What?
were faking.
Like faking being twins?
Yeah.
But what if they were like identical?
Yeah, true. I mean, yeah. If they're identical, if there was evidence, but I think my main concern, not to show too much of my morals, I think my main concern would be it's a setup, like it's a kink
Yeah.
between them.
Yeah.
yeah. And you've actually just reminded me of a threesome that I did have once,
Oh.
where I believed that we were three strangers, but when the sex began, they had such a unusual yet established dynamic that during the sex, I was just thinking, these are husbands. These are husbands pretending to be strangers. To the point where, Pip,
Oh.
while I'm like in the act,
Yeah.
I'm scanning the walls for evidence because I was in one of their house and it was like all pictures on the wall.
You're
And
kidding.
during the sex, I was like looking at the photos, being like, is that him? Is that him? Is that him? And then afterwards, when we left, one of them sent me a message like, thanks for a good time. And I said, come on. That's your husband, isn't it?
The gig is up.
And he was like, yeah, how did you know? I'm like, too obvious.
Oh
Too obvious.
my God. So did it kind of ruin the experience for you? Like, or because you were getting distracted? You were like, I can't focus.
I
I'm
suppose
just trying to play detective around this house.
It was still a great time, but
That's
I
good.
was absolutely, not in my head. Or was in my head, I should
Yeah.
say.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
scanning the room Columbo style.
That is so funny.
Yeah, but that's why I was thinking about, so that was clear, that was a kink of theirs, right?
Yeah.
So it was a kink that,
Yep.
that we were all strangers.
Totally.
But yeah, I perhaps I've had sex with enough strangers to know that the
Yeah.
vibe's not that clear when
Yeah.
it's actually strangers. Yeah.
Exactly. You're like, they're really getting along. Wow.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
so
yeah.
amazing.
Thanks for uncovering that memory.
That's what we're going to do. That's
Yeah,
what we're
yeah.
here to do.
You know you're a true slut when that just pops into your head. Oh, that's right.
I think we'll have a few more of those in the next half an hour.
Fingers crossed.
Now, look, we obviously asked you about the kind of dynamics that you're having with your threesome. So we did another poll. So obviously the most popular, which I'm not surprised about, was FFM. So that's female, female, male. 62% of you said this is your experience. And surprisingly, Hunter, we had a lot of DMs from guys who were commenting on this kind of dynamic for them. And they were like, I find this really difficult to do. So Ty said, porn makes it look really easy in FFM, but you have to please two partners. And there were so many people who were like, the pressure is on as the guy to like deliver and like make sure everyone's having a good time and stuff like that, which I found really interesting. And we also got this voice memo from Max talking about his first threesome experience.
So my threesome was a couple of years ago now with a girl who I was in an open relationship with and a female friend of hers. But I wasn't really ready for it, I don't think. As someone who's grown up a man in the manosphere and like, it's just really this massive thing, you have a threesome with two girls and it's meant to be this crazy, awesome, masculine experience. But as soon as we'd premeditated it, so we'd kind of like booked it in a week in advance, the anxiety started and I started just thinking about it all the time and was so stressed out. And by the time we got in there, like, I was just so not in the moment and so in my head, I could kind of not even really focus on it. I wasn't kind of ready for that. I hadn't had enough twosomes yet to sort of get to a threesome. You know what I mean? It should be something that you sort of work towards or like build up to. Like, I kind of regret just jumping at the first opportunity to do it because I didn't feel quite ready for it.
I really love that voice memo. It was just
what
like,
a king.
yeah, like so candid to like talk about like the stress of that. And I really understood what he meant in terms of like the anxiety building up because you knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And I feel like for a guy in that scenario, if you feel like you have to be the performer and like really lead it, if you're that anxious, like sometimes it can be really hard to get it up. Like I don't have a penis, but I feel like I've spoken to enough like friends about that. Is that
Yes,
something that, you can kind of like
Yeah, definitely.
understand?
I can definitely relate to getting too in your head about something. And, we talked earlier about planning versus spontaneous. And I think, planning can be great, but to a point like that, for Max, it sounded like it was overplanned and he really got in his head about it. And it's a great reminder from Max that, we're talking about tertiary level sex here. And I think him saying, I hadn't had enough twosomes to have a threesome, I mean, that's genius. Pop that in a t-shirt. Max.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's postgraduate stuff.
Yeah,
we're talking about.
It's hard because you are navigating like so many bodies, like so many emotions. We're going to get into it in this episode, and there's like a lot of power dynamics, and just a lot of stuff to handle physically and like mentally. I also think like it was interesting to hear guys be like, it's kind of hard as the guy with two girls. I wonder if those guys though were maybe having sex with girls who weren't quite like sure of their sexuality, and they weren't necessarily like ready to, kind of like Max, they weren't ready to do it either, and see like what it's like to sleep with a woman as well.
Yeah, maybe the vibes weren't.
Because then the guy
perfect.
feels like they have to be like, okay, I'm pleasuring both of these girls, and maybe they're not interacting a lot. Like,
Yeah,
I
see what you
wonder if
mean.
that's happening.
Yeah, like it's a 3-wheel. It's a tricycle. Okay, and if 2 of the wheels are working great, the
Yes.
3rd one can take a break. right? But if
Exactly.
2 of them are down, Max is fine for his life.
Yeah, exactly. Put that on a shirt.
Thanks.
Tricycle. Love it. Okay, so the next popular sort of like dynamic at 27% of you have tried is MMF or MFM, which is male, male, female, or male, female, male. Now, we always say on the hookup that like we're not the experts, we're like learning along with you. I didn't know that there's like a difference between where you place this F.
No, neither me.
Right? So let me explain, because someone explained it in a DM to me. They were like, MMF is basically like where 2 guys, like they're interacting and they're actually like pleasuring each other and being part of the experience as well as the woman. Whereas if the F is in the middle, that's like the 2 guys are likely like not interacting with each other. They're there to service the girl, or the girl to service them. And they might be like just straight guys.
Yeah, accidental brushing
Exactly.
at best.
At
It's the best you're hoping for in it.
Yes, yes. But
It's
you know,
actually pretty clever, because if you look at the letters together, it's giving sort of MFM. It's giving sort of spit roast.
put it. Oh my God, yes.
Oh my God.
It's giving actually like high five, like Eiffel Tower.
Yeah,
Are you
yeah,
leaving me
yeah.
hanging
That's why
up
they call
here?
it the menage en trois, I was thinking, because the Eiffel Tower.
This might be a TMI, but in my field profile, my only thing in my caption is never been to Paris, but I've heard the Eiffel Tower is fun. Do we laugh?
Love it.
There's a lot to work with when people message me.
Absolutely.
But like I was saying to you earlier, like this is such a hard dynamic, and it's kind of the dream one. And I feel like it's gaining popularity. Like I don't feel like this was a thing a couple of years ago, but I think now that a lot more people are accessing their own sexuality, it's less taboo. They feel like more comfortable like
100%.
exploring their bisexuality and stuff like that. I definitely think it's gaining popularity. So 27% makes sense to me. But all the girls in our DMs, Hunter, were literally like, girl, you need to get on this. So Sonia was like all about getting worshipped and being the center of attention. I was like,
Amen. That sounds great.
doesn't that sound fun? Like I want to do that so bad, but I just am yet to find the people, which we'll get into it. But Rach sent us this voice memo, and this is like quite literally the best thing I've ever heard in my life.
So my partner and I have recently started having some threesomes together. For context, we have been in a monogamous relationship for just over 4 years. He's straight, I'm also straight, and the guy that we bring in is also straight. The dynamic of what we're doing is really truly about empowering me, and I feel very like sexually empowered and very just like powerful energy, I guess. And so what we do is typically, because the guys had to get to know each other a bit, we play some games, maybe play some strip games and just get comfortable being naked around each other, and then normally go and like to the couch or something, and I will give them both head. That's where we started. It was just head, and I'll get them both to orgasm, and that gives me lots of joy and lots of like empowerment. My partner actually found it really like a turn on to watch that from his end, like to see a different side of his experience. And we always come back and have chats together afterwards and just make sure that everyone was comfortable with what we did. We have progressed further to intercourse before. We've been back and forth about our comfort with that, and we will still see that same person and just do the head side of things again, because that's what we're really comfortable with, and it works well for us. The boys don't really have to interact in any kind of way. Even when we had intercourse, they weren't really interacting. It was all about me, and I keep the dynamic, I keep the flow, and make sure that no one feels left out. So the attention's on me, but also the pressure's a little bit on me.
I cannot tell you. Like, I was like, you are living so many people's dream right now, Rachel. Like, this is insane.
I found that really educational. That's not a
Yeah.
dynamic that I knew existed.
Yeah. So that's like the new age. I guess this is like how people are having sex now. Like boys are becoming more comfortable with this, like watching people, not necessarily interacting, but being in the room.
Yeah,
like two
yeah,
straight
yeah.
guys and just being like, yep, we're cool with this.
Yeah, it's sort of less of an orgy, more dinner and a show.
Yes. Yes. And it's interesting how she sort of ended that and was like, you know, the pressure is kind of on me in this scenario.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Do you think that
Yeah.
do you think that it's sort of all of the glory and all of the work?
Yes. I think you're like all of the glory, but all of the guts as well. Like it's brave. Like it's a lot of work for you, but you know, in for a penny, in for a pound,
Absolutely.
right?
Another thing I thought was interesting there was because I'm just assuming it might be the first time the guys have done that or it's an unusual dynamic. It sounds like it does force a bit of conversation about it too.
Yeah.
Like this, obviously they did a bit of pre-chat. It sounds like they've gone from giving head to full-blown intercourse and maybe back again, which you assume has had quite a bit of conversation.
Yeah.
And so that's a surprise positive, I think, of trying something new too, is that it does default to perhaps being more open about your boundaries and what you're looking for.
Yeah, 100%.
Rather than like, can you be here in 10 minutes?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. I think like it requires a lot of communication and negotiating there. And yeah, you raise a really good point. Like it is something that you wouldn't just be able to jump into. And I guess it's like an emotional maturity thing for like three people to just be like, this works for us and we're like going to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. But yeah, so that's obviously one way that you can do male, male, female. Like that being MFM. I was like, dream. That's so cool. But as I said before, I do kind of want my boys to be kissing. I want their swords to be touching.
Yeah,
I want something.
You want it to be a bit messier.
Yeah, and I want to watch that.
Mix.
And I want to be like I just want to be like, yeah, you guys like each other. Like that's really nice. Tom sent us a voice memo actually as a bisexual guy, and he was like, had the same issue as me, finding that it's very scarce to find these kind of dynamics.
Many of the dating apps or profiles on dating apps that you see are just a lot of female is bi, male is very straight. Do not attempt to play with me at all. So it's very closed off and can be a little frustrating.
Yeah, I feel that frustration.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially if you felt that there was like that sounded like some of those profiles that he would be a little hostile to it too. You know what I mean? It would be hard to not be in your head if you were terrified you were going to stress someone out.
Exactly. And like even on my experience of the apps, like clearly I've put in my bio like this is kind of what I'm looking for. But then you'll get
Enchanté.
Yes, enchanté. Oui. And then people will match with me, and then clearly like they don't even have heteroflexible in the bio. So I'm like, what are we doing?
What are we doing here?
Don't waste my time.
Come on, Trevor.
Literally. Okay, so the last one to round up as well with the dynamics, male, 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 female, 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 or just non-binary. So basically like one of a kind, and 11% of you were sort of doing that, which is I imagine where you're at with your...
Yeah. My threesomes have all been, 10s on the Kinsey sale or 1 on the Kinsey sale. The gay end, whatever the gay end is.
Love that.
And obviously everyone's different. Let a thousand blossoms bloom. But I do find listening to these voice notes, like a lot of the male threesomes are having, they do feel a bit more wham bam, thank you, ma'am. Not as much sort of pre-chats and cuddles afterwards.
Yes, not as much
giving me a bit of
aftercare.
Envy. Exactly.
Yeah, I feel like by the end of this, you might be like, I might actually approach it in a different way.
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
a little softer.
There's a lot to unpack in terms of like the comms and the power play dynamics, which we're going to get into now. So a lot of chat in the DMs from this was about like whether or not it's a good idea to do it with a couple or singles or friends, strangers, that kind of dynamic. So basically couples versus singles. So we got a voice memo from Beth who reckons that it's way better with single people.
If you're in a relationship and you bring someone else in, there is way too much previous history with a partner that comes into play when it comes to having fun in the bedroom. And I feel like having those restraints in some way can sort of restrict the amount of fun you get to have. So if you go into a threesome scenario with like a couple of randoms or just acquaintances or whatever, where no one is actually attached to each other, I find there's just like you just let go of your inhibitions. Like you're there to have a really good time. You're not worrying about like other people's feelings if you're looking at that person too much or not enough. Like everyone's there just to have a good time and just let go.
What do you think of that?
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that if you are in a couple, you can totally have great threesomes. It's not a sort of binary thing. But I totally agree with what Beth's saying that, a threesome's a special occasion. And if all three of you are single, then there is absolutely less baggage, less going on. I think less inhibitions. Sometimes the sort of sex you might be having in a threesome could be like wildly different to the sex that you're having with your partner. So you may even be sort of I don't know, not embarrassed, but you might be shy about showing that off in front of your partner and stuff like that. So yeah, I think there's just much less politics at play.
Yeah.
But again, not that it can't be as great with a partner, but I feel like it's easier.
Yeah.
Definitely easier.
Definitely a lot of people agreed with you on that in the DMs. Mads saying my advice would always be the extra. It's a lot less messy. You can walk away whenever. Joe saying better as friends. A couple person will always prioritize their partner's needs over the third's. I found that really interesting because I had never really considered that, but there is some sort of like unspoken rules and sort of power dynamic and play going on when you enter as a third, right? And someone DM'd us, Hunter, and was like, you need to talk about couples privilege. And I was like, what do you mean couples privilege? And they were like, check out this book, The Ultimate Guide to Threesomes. Now, it is in our show notes if you want to go and check it out. So the couple gets to negotiate in advance and come to their own agreements. And the third gets to opt in or out based on those agreements. While this is still a consensual agreement, there's a power imbalance worth acknowledging if not all three people were around for negotiations. Are the couples being given more importance than the thirds? If yes, that is a problem. I found that actually really it does make a lot of sense to me.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like if someone's not there to like have their say, and if they're just kind of like, really this is kind of what we want to get out of it, and you're here to sort of like spice up our life and be that missing like unicorn moment, then that sort of is not a great thing.
No, it's not a great thing. But then a lot of the negotiating that would have happened before the third got there is probably sort of interrelationship politics. You know what I mean? So I'm not necessarily sure that the third needs to be privy to all of that.
No.
But I have once had a threesome where I was the third, and obviously the couple had agreed to it.
Yeah.
But I can relate to that couple's privilege because in the middle of the threesome, I could tell it wasn't going well. Like physically it was going fine, but one of the couple was pissed off with the other. And I realized, there's some politics at play here that I am not aware of.
Yeah,
and
like,
that's the privilege, I
maybe
think.
they like also broke a boundary or something, and they were like, we discussed this before, and like blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
like whatever.
Or, maybe before I got there and they realized what dynamite I was. Maybe they weren't, I think maybe one of them was more into the idea than the other.
Yeah.
One of them was trying to convince themselves. And maybe similar to what Max said earlier, like maybe in the moment, it fell apart a bit and they thought, no, I'm not up for this.
Yeah.
And I could feel that vibe in the room. And that's a good example of like a conversation they've had that I wasn't privy to.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think in an ideal situation, if you're going in as a third, like, absolutely there's going to be some interpersonal like couple chat. But I think in general, like just be upfront and honest, I guess, about like what you want to get out of it. And then your unicorn or your third could just be like, this is what I want to get out of it too. Like these are my boundaries. This is what I want to do. I also found it interesting that it also said the couple had built-in support after the threesome, especially if they live together, aftercare, debrief, etc.
So true.
Not that you would know about that.
No, that's right. So true. Or they'd have a bitter fight, one or the other.
Someone storming out of the house either way. So yeah, obviously being the unicorn can be it can be a really positive experience. It can go weirdly as well. We had so many DMs from people talking about this. Nicola saying, I've always been the unicorn / not in the relationship. Sometimes it means you get heaps of attention and sometimes totally left out.
Left out?
I know. That's
I'm surprised to hear that.
That's a really bad threesome if you're getting left out.
Especially if you're the guest. No offense, Nicola, I'm sure you're great at it. But yeah, you'd be devo to be left out.
I know, because normally you are the star of the show at that point because the couple is literally like, you're our little like shiny new toy. Like
it's
we're
the novelty
excited.
factor.
Totally.
Yeah.
I feel like overwhelmingly in the DMs that we had people saying that they love doing stuff with couples. Jess came through and sent us this voice memo.
So after my marriage to my ex-husband ended, I started dating my now partner, and I expressed to him early on that I thought I was bisexual and that I wanted to explore dating and sleeping with women, but with him involved too. Luckily, he was really supportive, and through a dating app, we organised to meet up with a woman for a drink. The vibes were right, and we ended up going home with her. We were initially all really, really awkward, but once we started kissing and we got our clothes off, it was fucking amazing. It was so out of our comfort zone, but such a safe experience. And there was heaps of communication around protection, boundaries, consent, and aftercare. We've had more threesomes with different women since then, and each one has been super hot, but also super wholesome, with heaps of laughter, care, and cuddles. It's been so much fun. Definitely recommend.
Isn't that
Oh
good?
my God, and the giggle at the end?
I know.
I feel like she could be an ambassador for threesomes.
Yeah.
That
Jess
sounds
is
like the
doing
perfect
it right.
scenario, right?
Yeah, no, it does. And like, yeah, as she said, the aftercare, the debrief, all of that, the cuddles, like you can tell that was genuinely from her tone of voice. Like she's coming from Such a beautiful place. Has like
Totally.
had such a cool like bi awakening essentially.
Yeah, yeah.
Or gay
Also, it
awakening.
sounded a bit like she was whispering in the staff room at work or something. So
Absolutely. Jess was in the lunchroom when I said, hey, babe, can you send me a voice memo? We asked you on the hookup poll again. We asked another poll. Are you using threesomes to sort of explore your sexuality? 66% of you said yes. And it makes complete sense. Like this is a safe space. And yeah, a lot of people came through and said that this was something that they really enjoyed doing with their partners. So James saying, my partner and I enjoyed threesomes, whether it's FFM, MFM, MMF. It allows us to explore our sexuality safely together and for us to fulfill fantasies that we have together. We got this voice memo as well from Claire talking about it.
For me, having a threesome with a couple has been a great way to explore my attraction to women without the pressure of it being a one-on-one interaction. I always let both of them know where I'm coming from before we hook up. I never want anyone to feel like an experiment, and I love that they really love each other, so it feels like a safe space.
This is interesting though. We had a DM from Austin who said, in my experience, way too many people fetishize bi people as objects for threesomes. So obviously there's like a little bit of a risk here. And a lot of you agreed with this. You know, we put up a poll and asked, like, is this something that you relate to? Like, you know, is there a risk that your sexuality is being used in this dynamic in a negative way? 78% of you said they agree. Like, people do fetishize bi people as objects for threesomes. And 22% of you said no. What are your thoughts on this? Like, is this something that, like, have you ever like considered this? I guess you wouldn't because of your sort of dynamic of like mainly men.
yeah, no, I haven't, but I definitely have gay friends, guys, who are fetishizing bi guys.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's definitely a real thing. I think you said earlier that there's been a more increase in sort of guys coming to terms with having a bit of bisexuality,
100.
but with that, I think it's increased the sort of fetish as well.
Yeah, 100%. I would agree. I think as well in this scenario, I was thinking like maybe like female male threesomes is where that would happen quite a bit. In my experience, like again, like guys are like, oh, I'm so willing to have a threesome with two girls, but not another guy. And I think there's something about that where it's like, oh, there's this like hot chick and they're like drooling over the fact that they have like two women. And I can imagine that going a little bit south. And we did actually have a voice memo from Imo talking about this exact thing.
I've copped a lot of shit from people who hypersexualize bi women and assume that we're down for everything. And if we say no, it's playing hard to get. I know you want to. All bi girls I know have done this, which is always a lie. And so I tend to hold off on telling particularly straight cis men that I'm bisexual, not out of any kind of shame, but just because 9 times out of 10, the response is just to immediately ask for a threesome. And I've got no issue with threesomes, big fan, but I'm just very uncomfortable with the fact that to straight men, they're essentially using my sexuality to fulfill some kind of fantasy for themselves without this consideration that bi people also have, you know, feelings and desires that aren't just fulfilling fantasies for other people.
That's really interesting. The idea that sort of some people can use the bisexual label as a shorthand for up for anything.
Yeah.
That must be,
Yeah, they
stressful.
just want to slot you in like wherever you go. And that, yeah, like she said, like not considering your feelings, your desires, which is why I think like when you go into this threesome dynamic, like you always got to like be standing up for yourself and also be so clear with your couple or whoever you're doing it with to be like, what do we want to get out of this? Like, let's talk about it, like blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Because we use threesomes as an umbrella term, but as we sort of learnt today, like it's very nuanced.
Yeah.
There's lots of, you know, different ways to go about it. So
Yes.
just because you're bi doesn't mean you're up for all of them.
Okay, so obviously we can't talk about the threesome without talking about the logistics, right?
The mechanics.
The mechanics of it all, because as you are very well aware, I have not had my threesome yet. I haven't had a threesome in general, but I always do wonder what goes on in that room. What's going down? Hunter, what is happening? How is the flow working for you? How do you manage the dynamic and like people not feeling left out and stuff like that?
Well, you know, I've been thinking about this, and in many ways, even if you have planned the threesome, discussed the dynamics, boundaries, how it actually is going to happen is a bit of a surprise. And, you know, the thing I think that is probably the most common and that I have definitely been on the bad end of is that, you know, it's a game of three. And so somebody in the game of three is being slightly left out at all times. And in a great threesome, that's just water off a duck's back. You know what I mean? You just got to find yourself a job. There's always something to do.
Yeah.
But sometimes you're really out in the cold.
Like
There's
Nicola,
no getting around that.
Like Nicola who DM'd us and she was like, I feel left out sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Damn.
And sometimes, as I said, like if it's going really well and so your confidence is going, sky high, all good, you can be left out and roll with it. But other times you're not feeling that confident and then being left out, like time grinds to a halt.
Oh my God.
As you're just on the outer edges of the bed thinking, is it time to make a sandwich? No, not
And
really.
you're like getting in there, be like, anyone want a massage or anything?
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
You can do that, right? So like, I'm assuming that like you said, there's always going to be a lull in activity and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's going to be ebbs and flows. You can't be like fucking and sucking like the whole time. Like
No.
someone's got to go get the water. Someone's got to hold the hair back.
Exactly.
Or in
Well,
my
not
case,
yours, not
don't
yours.
touch my fucking hair.
Someone's got to be protecting the hair.
They said, I'm putting it in a ponytail. No one touch it.
Look, you can. There's always something to do, but sometimes, depending on the dynamics, there's no denying when you're off Broadway. You know what I mean?
You're the
and,
understudy.
Yeah, and I suppose, if I'm going to be really tough about it, that's what you've signed up for, that risk.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It is a game of three.
Yeah.
So on the flip side of that is that you got to try and work quite hard to make sure that nobody feels too left out.
We had actually a great voice memo from Pat about this, actually. He was like, you really need to be cognizant of the attention sharing.
The best thing that you can do is to provide not necessarily equal attention, because that might not be what they want, but fair. You have to be fair. You have to, share the love. I know it sounds really corny, but you have to share the love. You don't necessarily have to replicate the exact same moves, but you do need to be cognizant that the attention you're giving is not concentrated on one and then the other is only getting a token. You really do have to be there for both. If you're only participating in a threesome and you're really only interested in one of the two people, just go have sex. You don't have to have a threesome.
Amen, Pat.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Speak on it.
It's like, in the 90s, my grandparents had a timeshare on the Gold Coast.
Why are we talking about this? But keep going.
Because you got to share the time, babe. You got to share the time. It's a bit like that, It's all the investors need to be getting bang for their buck.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're not coming back to the Gold Coast.
It's such a true, very that. It's such a mental load as well to be like so aware of the attention. So, like when Max said he wasn't quite ready for it, he was like, I needed to get more flying hours with my twosomes. It's like, yeah, you got to be ready that you have to be really aware of the room and make sure that you're like doing right by everybody. But then there are times where it's like, well, I just learned this about threesomes through this show, right? I didn't know this, but there's like two formations that people talk about. There's the triangle. So that's like a human centipede where there's action throughout the whole way.
Yeah,
like
everyone's on it.
And then there's the V where it's like there's one person here and two people are like servicing that one person. So like we said at the very top of this episode, like there are so many different ways you could do it.
Absolutely.
There's so many different ways.
Great advice there from Pat, though, about if you're really just trying to shag one person, you should just try and have a twosome.
Yeah.
Because I think, like, especially in the queer space where a lot of people are polyamorous, I think it is dangerous if you're arranging a threesome because you're really into one of a couple. Or more importantly, I suppose, if someone in the couple is organising a threesome because they're desperately, if it's a twosome in threesome's clothing, I don't think that's going to be a happy ending.
Yeah, 100. We also had Jay saying it's best when everyone's a giver and it just flows. I thought that was an interesting concept, and a lot of people DM'd us like similar things, like don't be a taker. Like there's got to be three givers in the room that you've got to be really willing and enthusiastic, I should say, about like being a giver.
Yeah.
Can we put Chaperone underneath that? I don't know. We probably can't. We don't have the rights. But obviously, wait. Before we move on from the flow and the dynamic and everything and the pacing, it sounds like everyone had a pretty good handle on this, but also we were talking off air about this. As a guy, is it really difficult if you accidentally come too quickly?
Great question, Pip. I would say that's actually a great point. I would say that not coming too quickly is my number one priority. Have a threesome. I think it goes, don't come too quickly. Enjoy the process is number two.
Yeah.
Because, like I said earlier, like if you're out in the cold in a threesome, time grinds to a halt, but nothing slows time like having already finished and just politely sitting or, starting the cleanup. It's like at the end of a party, if you're at the afters and you realize that the person who's hosting the party has started to do the dishes, like that's a bit what it's like. Like if you're like tidying up, trying to make the bed around them, like that's Nobody wants to feel like the housemaid.
No. Okay, yeah, that's so fair. I feel like that's not going to be an ish with anyone who owns a vulva or is a woman. Like, that's it's going to take a little bit longer. But for guys, I feel like that's a big thing that's on your mind.
Yeah, or even 3 dicks, that allows for a lot of variation in how long it's going to take too. So yeah, that's a great point. If anyone is listening out there, I think that you need to make that number one priority. Don't go too soon.
Don't go too soon. So with a threesome as well, like we've been talking a lot about the power dynamic, the emotional mental load. Have you ever experienced anyone in a couple scenario or singles or whatever have like jealousy or anything like that where they've just maybe not figured out, like maybe they just didn't realize what they were getting into a little bit?
I had an unusual experience quite recently where I had a threesome in ancient times, ages ago, let's say 6 years ago. And that person now has a partner. And when he mentioned that we'd threesomed in the past, the partner was engulfed by jealousy.
Oh.
So even historic threesomes can be fraught.
Yeah.
You have to be.
What do you call that? Retroactive jealousy.
Hard to fix.
We had a lot of people come through and say threesomes have been a little bit of a breeding ground or a little bit dangerous in terms of like that dynamic of like, especially when there's a couple. And Tash sent us this voice memo.
It was an instance where I'd matched with a girl on a dating app and she'd been very open with the fact that, she had a partner and she was looking at exploring her bisexual side by adding another girl to the mix. And like everything was going fine and it was really enjoyable. Her and I got on really, really well, and like most of the conversation was just between the two of us and her partner was kind of just there. And then when it got to play, I focused on her and she focused on me. But it ended up just being a thing of she wasn't comfortable with me playing with her partner. And I hadn't really done anything with him. I hadn't kissed him or touched him sexually or anything like that. He was the one who was initiating with me. I think that's one of the issues with threesomes, is that people don't really consider the actual dynamic and they romanticize the idea in their head. So when they get to the reality, it's just like it's all too much and too overwhelming and can cause really big emotions and jealousy to arise.
I mean, that's exactly what you kind of experienced when the partner wasn't quite into it.
And similar to Max earlier, again, like another example of how you don't really know how you're going to feel into the moment. And that person obviously thought they were bang up for it, but in reality. And that has reminded me of another threesome I had.
Wow. We're going right into the vault today. Go for it. I love it.
So I had a boyfriend once upon a time who I thought had the hots for somebody else. And I was trying to play it really cool about that and not be jealous. And then we ended up in a threesome situation. And it was all, I got through it without showing my jealousy. But afterwards, I was like, no, that was a bad idea. It made the jealousy worse. Yeah. You know what I mean? So that's another good tip, I think. Don't try and be too cool about it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like you need to really have your heart in it or your dick in it.
Or your dick or your poussoir. And like, you know what? I think we can avoid all of this stuff. Like we've sort of hinted at it, and a lot of you have had like great communication, aftercare, the debrief, all of it. I think that's the thing. Like you do really need to set up like really good comms with your partners, your friends, whatever. I know it's happening spontaneous. Like I saw you from across the bar. Let's go back to the hotel room. But like all of those people were still like, we had really good conversations about consent, about protection, about all of that. So
and being honest with yourself in those conversations too. Like don't find yourself trying to play it too cool.
Exactly. Like don't try and like you might like Max, how we keep going back to Max, but it was such a good voice memo. But like he was like, I wish I didn't jump at it so quickly because I thought this might be the only time. There'll be other times.
Exactly.
Like if you live to the good old age of 75, babe, you might be still sucking and fucking till then.
Exactly. It's hope for you, babe. It's gonna
Thank you so much. I know.
By 75 you will get to France.
I know.
Could be for your 70th, but you'll get there.
I know. It's like I'm literally like, I'm not going to give up. Don't worry.
Yeah.
We'll get it done.
You'll be carried up the Eiffel Tower, but you will get up there.
I will get there. But yeah, so, take all that into consideration. Obviously, like we are not the experts, and I think we should actually get an expert to talk about how to have those conversations, how to initiate it, especially with like partners. Because if you, like yourself, you're like, oh, they have the hots for the other person. And like, what if your partner at the time was like, I really want to try this with that person. Like, how do you have that conversation? How do you handle it if you don't want to do it as well? I think that's a good point. We'll get an expert. We're simply just two girls in chairs. Like, we don't know what we're fucking doing. Sorry. But, you
Sorry.
know, I feel like I've learnt so much actually from all these DMs and voice memos. I feel like the threesome has become even more complicated for me now because there's so many ways you can do it.
I feel like you've set yourself up beautiful for a sequel episode though. Like when you seal the deal, you're going to have you're going to have all these voice notes and all these DMs as research in your mind.
Yes.
You'll be like, just before we begin.
Yes. Well, Hunter, thank you so much for coming on and chatting about threesomes and so generously sharing.
Oh, thanks so
many
much. That's the spirit of the
experiences.
threesome. Share, baby.
That's it. Exactly. Now, look, if anyone wants to find you online, where can they find you on Insta, wherever?
Yeah, hit me up Instagram at Mr. Hunter Smith across everything actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your LinkedIn?
That's just stay away from my LinkedIn.
Get the
please.
fuck off my LinkedIn. I know we don't because this is the only jobs that he needs. And we'll be voice memoing.
Yeah.
As the pitch.
You'll check out my LinkedIn. It'll say open to work from today.
Should I be like open to France on mine?
Yeah.
Open to travel.
Yeah, ready to travel.
Hunter, thank you so much.
Thanks, Pip.